Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Finance Committee of Upper Hunter Shire Council. This meeting will be audio recorded and those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements. There is to be no other recordings of this meeting without the prior authorisation of the committee. Are there any apologies? No apologies? Thank you. A copy of the minutes have been distributed with the agenda. Any questions or comments about those minutes? No, could I have someone move and second it? Thank you, Councillor Fisher. A seconder? Councillor Burns. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Moving on to, sorry, are there any declarations of interest? I would just declare that I am a director of the Murray Vale Retirement Homes Limited, which is a provider of aged care in the Shire. And if there's discussion of government place, I'll remain in the room. Moving on to business item FCR 081, the financial summary and investment report. Mr. Phelps, you might like to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. So on page 2, we have our financial information summary, which just gives you a high-level overview of where the month of July ended up. Being the first month of the financial year, it's always a difficult one. It's always one that has a lot of movements happening still from year-end stuff going through. So as noted there, we're just finalising the end of the 19-20 financial year and incorporates a number of adjustments that will happen with the restricted assets. In the August meeting, those restricted asset movements will be reflected within votes coming through, and that they mainly relate to carryover capital works that have been brought through and unexpended grant funding that we've received that we hadn't fully expended by the end of June 2020. Just going through the main impacts in the July period, which has got a couple there. So in revenue is the main area of impact coming through, and our revenue is up by about $500,000 on the July budgeted numbers. And the main reason for that is that there's 3 items in there for the waste general purpose revenue, which is the rates revenue, and the water supply revenue, and they're mainly relating to the annual rating that we've done and the pensioner concessions that are attached to that annual rating. So we've just had a lower than expected pensioner concessions applied for to date. So they continue to be applied for over the course of the next couple of months anyway, coming through. At which time, if we haven't fully utilised the expenditure in there for those concessions, then we'll actually record that as income coming into the mix. The other big item there, which is nearly half the amount of money of the $500,000, is the fire services levy. So we've actually received the funding from the state government now to cover off the massive increase that we've got this year in the fire and emergency services levies. So as highlighted earlier, I think during May, we highlighted that our levies have gone up by $500,000 compared to last year, which is quite extraordinary. Moving into next year, though, we might have a bit of a more tougher period because we won't have that one-off hit of cash coming in for it. So it's a bit of a cherish at the moment, but we're going to have to try and fund $250,000 in the 2022 budget year.
Through the chair, should we be writing to the relevant minister to raise our concerns about this again?
Yes, definitely. I think that we should be advocating now for that impost that we're going to have in the 2022 year.
I think LG New South Wales has lobbied fairly hard on behalf of councils, and it's certainly it's not fair, and that's the general sentiment in the industry. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so it's just keeping the pressure up and keeping the campaign rolling.
Moving into the non-operating revenue and expenditures, it's negligible coming through. Operating expenditure, a little bit overspent at the moment to July. We just have a bit more in maintenance on our roads and bridges coming through. So we've just had some works that carried over from June in that area. And with the capital works area there, we're a little bit overspent, but as I said earlier, we'll be bringing a lot of cash coming through from the restricted assets for that works that got carried over. So that'll happen in the August period.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just moving back to the operating expenditure, roads and bridges maintenance higher, $113,000. I think I wrote a letter, an email to Christian and yourself regarding that matter. Look, this is pretty serious because what we're having now that we aren't maintaining a trafficable road, and yet we're $113,000. Where's this money just going? And it was reported to me that one of the graders was going to have to be stood down in the Merriwa area when we're not coping with what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
I think we really need to address this. And I think the earlier part where that there was only, I think it was 1.6 or $1.8 million for road maintenance. Look, that's just totally inadequate. And to expect the infrastructure people to go get the work done when it's not funded.
Yep. Councillor Campbell, I'll take it on notice and then I'll supply a response in regards to where that expenditure has been actually spent over the course of July. And also a response to your question. Yep.
Just further to that, it's my understanding that the resheeting budget is well over and that there's money in the gravel patching. Can we allow some kind of leeway between those two funds and some flexibility to allow the managers to actually do what needs to be done on each individual road?
Yeah, we'll raise that with the Director of Infrastructure and see whether or not we can allocate funds across the board. We can go through that process. I'll take that on notice as well.
Maybe something that can go through the Infrastructure Services Committee as well as a going forward.
Thank you. So overall, as you can see there, we're year to date, we're in front of budget by just over $250,000, of which most of that is the revenue side of things. The budget position doesn't change too much. We've done a couple of small votes in the July period, but it's mainly only recognising the fire emergency levy and also a bit of capital expenditure on a hostel. So we'll see that as we go through the service reports. So our budget position has remained the same, no change there with variations on the bottom line. The non-financial information, we've brought into account a lot of our new KPIs from the new DPOP that we've put down that was adopted in June. At the moment, as you can see there, we're off target by about 20 at this point in time. We've got a number of indicators that we've put in out of the DPOP that the software program hasn't issued a report on at this point in time. There's about 13 to 14 of them. I'll email around a list of those new KPIs that haven't appeared in the finance papers so that the committee can actually see those. But we've contacted our software provider to try and get that report amended so that we can bring those into account in the next meeting. A lot of the ones that we have are off track at the moment are COVID-19 related, which is we've got a bit of a carryover from the pandemic that's going through at the moment. And out of the 20 that we have there, we've got about 11 definitely that is affected by COVID, and that comes back to situations such as the youth and child care services, as well as the VICs and tourism. Those ones are affected directly by the COVID situation. So we've got to be mindful of that moving forward with the unknown end result from the pandemic. So as we've highlighted there, there's 20 there that are effectively all the red ones. So that's just to read at your leisure, but we'll go through them as we're coming through the actual main services area. Moving on to...
just through the chair, the childcare, have we seen a reduction in numbers at the ELC because of COVID and family daycare?
Family daycare, we definitely have. We've seen a decline in educator children going through. ELC's been pretty stagnant. I think the director of it.
Yeah, through the chair, the numbers are back up again. So there was a decline a few months ago, but things have certainly picked up.
We have been successful in still getting state government funding for the childcare services. So from a revenue basis, we're actually sitting okay, and we'll see that as we come through the more detailed service reports. Okay. Any other questions in regards to those parts there? Just moving now and just into our financial summary area on pages 9 through to page 12. That's just more or less giving you the fund positions coming through, as well as then it gets into the function areas, so at the higher level coming through the mix there. So as you can see, the variations as we've highlighted in the summary area, and the requested votes that have gone in for this month, which is very minimal coming into the mix. Moving into the bank reconciliation and investments balances that we've got on page 13. Here you'll see that we've had that big spike in June, obviously with our drawing down of some loan funding. And then it's teetered off a little bit there into July, obviously with payment of creditors from year end coming through the mix. So we're sitting at the moment on effectively around the $36.5 million mark, $37 million mark.
Chair, just one thing on the page 13, unpresented checks. Could you just explain that a little more, please?
The unpresented checks are checks that have been raised that haven't been presented by the payee that we've issued them to. So they're just sitting in the books at this point in time.
So in effect, they haven't paid council for their service.
No. We've paid them a check, and they haven't actually banked the check as yet.
It's all right. I just seen a lot of money out if it was the other way around. Thank you.
Do we issue a lot of checks? That seems a little bit antiquated.
Through the chair, not many at all. We mainly only have petty cash now, but you will get your little associations that want a check. Yeah, very rare. Yep.
Sorry, could I just ask one more question? Just going back onto page 10. There is and I'm not sure if this was to be raised later in the next item, then we can hold it over to there. But I noticed that the actuals in public order and safety are $248,000 odd, and we budgeted for $4. That's a fairly substantial, an increase in fact of 6,000%.
That's with the revenue. So that's the money that we received from the state government to cover off the additional fire services.
Oh, that is the fire money.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So that's the $250,000.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then with the investment side of things there, just highlighting the investments that we're currently holding at this point in time on page 14. As you can see there, the interest rates have declined substantially. So our big money spinner was the one that we've got there for AMP that was 2%. Now we're only getting below 0.9. So it's just abysmal. And we may have the same effect as what we did last year, because we were factoring in, thinking that we were rather conservative of putting 1.5% in for this year. But it's just turned into nothing but a shocking world for the investing side anyway. But we'll have to investigate other means of investing for capital guaranteed investments. So we'll be looking at other factors other than just normal term deposits, which we only hold at this point in time. So we'll be trying to have a look and see whether or not we can increase the rate of return. Moving into the net current asset position.
Sorry,
there.
can I just ask through you, Mr. Chair, is it appropriate that we have that money tied up in investments in that? Look, could we go and purchase property that is safer?
With council, you would like to have fluid funds at council's beck and call,
Okay.
especially for water and sewer infrastructure that may fail. And also then we, with property, it's more of a stagnant, it's not a resaleable item that will happen instantaneously.
No worries.
Yeah, 3 years, Mr. Chair. For example, every quarter we get the rates in, so our cash spikes up, and we obviously invest that, but we need that for the operations. So if it's in property, it's not liquid. But certainly for longer term, it's a bit different.
Okay, moving through the net current asset positions, that the definitions are there, and then we've got the net current position, which is effectively the revised and forecasted budgets coming through to 21 for the net current position. And then we have the loan schedule on page 19, which, as you see there, with the recent loan borrowings, it's sitting at $33.5 million at the end of July. Moving through to the restrictions on pages 20 onwards, we have the definitions, 20 through to 33. We have the definitions there for our restrictions. Obviously, these will be amended coming into the August period with all the finalisation of the restricted assets coming through. So we've more or less changed a lot of the dates and so forth, and in regards to the definitions at this point in time. But we will be updating the actual wordings and the restrictions coming through for the August meeting. Moving into the restricted assets position, again, this will be updated with the final balances of the restrictions coming through. So we've really used the revised budgets from the June period and just brought them through with the movement in the 2021 projections coming through the mix. The only movement in the restrictions for this month has been just a bit of money moving out to pay for some air conditioning out of the hostel at Sedgenhoe. So apart from that, there's nothing else to highlight there.
Thank you very much indeed. We have a recommendation. Have someone move and second? Councillor Campbell, seconder. Councillor Fisher, thank you. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Now, FCR 082, the operational report.
Rightio. So we'll get into the more detailed, meaty part of the finance paper. So I'll just wrap it on, and if there's any questions, please pull me up. Moving through to the asset management area here on page 37, we've got no votes or surrenders, and pretty well just a little bit underspent at the moment, just with the road safety officers' salaries. KPIs on 38, we've got 3 green lights in regards to their recommendations, so nothing to highlight there. Communications.
Mr. Chair, the road safety officer, I think that was partly funded by government, wasn't it? Or
yep.
Yeah, and how long will that go on for?
Through the chair, it's 50% funded by the Transport for New South Wales now, which covers off her wages primarily, and effectively it's got a 3-year extension.
Okay, and so those recommendations will come back forward to the council or to the particular committees, is that right?
I would think that they'd go through the traffic committee.
Yes.
So those recommendations that she comes up with would go through the traffic committee. We share the resource with Muswellbrook and Singleton as well, of which we're a 15% payer for the actual cost of her wages. Muswellbrook 15% and Singleton 20%, based on her time that she spends in each of the shires.
Thank you.
Moving into communications on pages 39, nearly spot on budgets, so nothing to highlight there. And page 40 with the KPI, a green indicator there. Corporate services on page 41. Here we're a little bit overspent, and mainly it's a couple of offsetters in there. Obviously, with the resignation of our former general manager, we've had to have the Director of Corporate Services stepping up into that role. So there's a little bit of extra cost there, but which has been offset by resignation of our corporate planner in July, so they're offsetting each other coming through. So the bottom line is nearly spot on. Corporate services KPI on 42, it's a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Customer service on 43, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And the KPI also a green indicator on 44, so nothing to highlight there. Depot operations, no votes or surrenders here again. A little bit overspent, mainly just with the trade waste project out at Merriwa, so it's starting to get a bit of traction now, which is good. So it's been a long time coming, but we've actually got that starting to move along. So apart from that, everything else is pretty well spot on. Financial services on page 47 to 48, there's no votes or surrenders in here. A little bit overspent just with acquisition of a couple of the additional equipment for the council chambers here, just with the webcams and so forth. So obviously with all the streaming and everything, we've got a few more cams coming in. KPIs on page 49, green indicator there. And then on 50, we've got the on-cost report that obviously in the first month, it's pretty well nearly spot on budget coming through. So, so that'll obviously graph will spread across the page as the year goes on. Fleet management on page 53 to 51, I beg your pardon, to 52. No votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit underspent at the moment. Obviously, we've just a little bit underspent in fuel and plant costs at the moment. It's always difficult to judge how much we're going to spend and what breaks down. Our fleet hire recovery is a little bit behind, but not a huge amount. It's about 3% behind. So obviously as works go through, that'll hopefully catch up coming into the mix. KPIs on page 53 to 55, all green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. General management on page 56. Here there's no votes or surrenders, and obviously we're a little bit underspent there with the salary, a little bit lower in spent in the salary area, just with the resignation of the former GM. So there's a bit of a saving there. Moving into the KPIs on page 57, a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Governance and risk on 58, no votes or surrenders. Here we're a little bit overspent at this point in time. We received our insurance policies and premiums. Obviously those have increased over time. They were a lot higher than what we anticipated. So we'll look at putting through a vote in next month just to cover off the additional cost for that. So we had a presentation from the insurers about our insurance premiums, and with all the catastrophe across the world, they've come up and said that they need more premiums, obviously. So, so we've had to foot the bill for that. The only other one in there that I'd highlight is that there's a legislative subscription as well, which we hadn't budgeted for. So we'll look at funding that in the August period, just for about $3.5 grand. So we'll go through and put that in for next month. Moving into the KPIs on page 59, this indicator it's the old indicator. It's not the new indicator. This includes our admin principles as well, which in the new indicator is actually only for policies. And at the moment, the policies are about 17% overdue. So the indicator would have been a amber light instead of a red light when you look at it. So that'll be amended in the August finance papers. Human resources on page 60. Got no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit overspend in our salaries areas for the administration costs for normal salaries, and also the work health safety area. Main reason for those is the additional resources that we've had to put into place for the COVID-19 pandemic, and mainly going through and doing a lot of safety plans that were required and recommended by New South Wales Health. So we've had to spend a lot more time with that, and also help with a lot of our community bodies, helping them actually put plans in place so that they can use our fields and so forth, so that everyone can keep safe. KPIs on page 61. No, green light there, so nothing to highlight there. Information services on page 62. Here we're a little bit underspent. We've got no votes or surrenders, just probably a little bit lower in software maintenance at this point in time, but it's again, it's a fluid one that goes up and down depending on needs. Information services KPI on page 63, the green light there. And just turn my phone off. And moving into the infrastructure support area there. We've got a little bit overspent in salaries at this point in time. So it's just be monitored as we're coming through. KPI side of things on page 65. Here we've got no votes or surrenders in revenue services. And it's almost spot on budget. So nothing to highlight in there. KPI side of things, we've got a red indicator and a green indicator coming through. The red indicator is more or less the percentage of rates and annual charges and arrears coming through to the mix. It will improve over time and come down below the set target as we come through the year. The value for unarranged accounts receivable, it's down now below the target, which is a good result. So it's now a green indicator. Moving into stores on page 69. Here we're a little bit overspent, mainly in regards to the suspense account, and that's money at the gravel that we bring into stock. So those will be put out to the actual road jobs that come through the mix. So that'll be cleared out of the mix. Moving into the purchasing KPI on page 70. Here we've got an amber light. Stock's a little bit above target at this point in time. Sustainability on page 71. Here, no votes or surrenders, a little bit underspent at the moment. Obviously, we've got our new sustainability manager, sustainability and waste manager on board now. So he's been mainly concentrating in waste at this point in time, and then he'll move into the sustainability area. KPI side of things on page 72, we have a red indicator there. Obviously, with that position being vacant for so long, we've got that new manager now on board who hopefully will start reviewing the action plan and start gets a bit of traction in regards to some of the outcomes that need to be achieved. Do you want to say?
Oh, through the chair, I was just going to point out it's got May 20 in the period, so obviously that is an error.
Yep. Okay. We'll review that one. Moving into community services, just in the admin and education area on page 73. Here we've got a little bit underspent at the moment, just in regards to salaries coming through the mix. KPI side of things on page 74 to 75. Got two green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Government Place Hostel on page 76 through to 77. Here we've got overall, we're a little bit in front of budget coming through the mix. Our subsidies are a little bit higher than we anticipated, which is good. And that's after review by some consultants we used at the back end of the 2020 financial year. However, our personal care salaries are still a little bit higher than what we anticipated, but we're trying to rectify that with a new rostering system that's going
Mr. Chair, just a question on that. I think we're looking at 130,000 last time overspent. I think my question was then, how are we going to address that situation to increase the revenue? We have to have those things in place. And I think there's a meeting on Monday afternoon too. How are we going to address the ongoing costs if it continues? Because we've got 2 vacancies there now. How are we going to address that? The shortfall, I'm saying.
Yep. We'll probably take that on notice and go through and raise that at the committee meeting.
I might just add that we are looking at employing additional casuals at the hostel as well. We have a shortage of staff at the moment. So we need to increase our casual pool because we're finding some staff are doing a lot of overtime, trying to cover shifts. The other thing we're doing is we're about to implement some new rostering software. So we'll have greater control of the shifts and the roster to try and bring down the expenditure in salaries. So there's a whole heap of other, obviously, work going on as well. We can discuss that at the committee meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to wait for the meeting then on Monday, and many of those questions probably be addressed at that meeting, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving into the KPI side of things, here we've got one green light and one amber light on 78 and 79, page 79. On page 80 and 81, the independent living units, here we're a little bit overspent at the moment. Just we've done some building maintenance that was required, so we've got some maintenance done a little bit earlier than we thought.
Sorry, could I just ask if an update can be provided as to the status of the repair of the 2 fire damaged units, please? It's, I think, getting close for 18 months since that fire.
Through the chair, I understand the development application is currently being assessed. It shouldn't be, or actually should be pretty close to being determined, that application. So I'll follow that up and let you know where it's up to.
Yeah, that project's being managed by the Special Projects Group. I understand is one of their capital projects.
Okay, thank you. KPI on page 82, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Moving into the before and after school care on page 84, no votes or surrenders and nearly spot on budget coming down the mix there. A little bit under in our user fees, obviously with the amount of children and so forth going through earlier in July. Numbers did improve at the back end of July though, which was quite good, as you'll see in the KPIs, but we've had a bit of saving also then in our costs coming through because of the lower children numbers. So with the KPIs on pages 85 to 86, 2 green indicators there. So they're both above targets at this point in time, which is really good. So that they improved markedly up to the end of July.
Through you, Mr. Chair, has there ever been any investigation done on out of hours and before and after school care on the actual shift work basis that we enjoy here? No, not as far as I'm aware. We've done that analysis, but we can take that on notice and ask whether or not that can be obtained from records. If not, it's something that we can be mindful moving forward. I think there's look, there's a market there, and I think we're missing out. Personally, I think you could actually make pretty good revenue out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we're a little bit hamstrung with the building of being at St Mary's, and I know that there's been discussion in regards to the operations for a lot of Catholic schools with the actual SUSH that's actually on their premises, that they're actually the Catholic schools are actually taking over those businesses. We haven't had any of those indications at this point in time, but I understand that out of Denman they have. So it's one of those markets that we've got a premise up there at the moment, and we'd have to severely look at what we're going to do moving forward if they decide to take that on.
I just make the point as well, if it's helpful, and I'm aware of other communities with similar workforce demographics that have undertaken studies into the needs of children's services that might be worth having a look at.
Mm. The just on the they're actually referred to as St Nicholas daycares, unless you are, and I'm going to be very sensitive here, unless you are a Catholic, you do not get in. So the out of hours school care is only for children that they deem appropriate. So the market will still be there for us to fund the shortfall. It's a funny business model that they run.
Anyhow, we'll take that on notice and see what other information we can gather. Moving into Early Learning Centre on page 87 to 88. Here I've got a vote and surrender going through, just offsetting one another. And this is more or less to identify the additional state government childhood package that's come through. So we received another $19,500, which is more or less offsetting against the lower fees and charges at this point in time. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget coming through, so we'll continue to monitor that as we're coming through the mix to see how it's travelling, especially with the COVID pandemic continuing. Moving into the KPIs on page 89, a green indicator there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Family daycare, again, here we've got a small vote and surrender going through. A little bit in front of budget at the moment, which is quite good. So again, this is more or less just in regards to the COVID pandemic and getting further assistance from the state government. And this is the one that's really affected by the utilisation numbers, as you can see on page 91, with the KPI being a red. So normally we go for 50 full-time children in with the educators. We only got 34 at this point in time. Moving into social protection on 92 to 93, no votes or surrenders here. It's very negligible what's gone through at this point in time. We've received a small grant coming through. That's been one bonus, and that's just for the Blandford Public School up there. They're doing a little bit of a sustainability project, which is quite good. So we'll be helping them fund that. KPI-wise side of things on page 94, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Youth services on 95 to 96, no votes or surrenders. And pretty well overall, we're nearly spot on target coming through. A little bit lower in our drop-in and EIPP salaries at this point in time. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight in there. KPI side of things, 2 green indicators and then also 2 red indicators. And obviously with the attendance at the youth centres has been affected somewhat coming through, and also the participation and leadership events has also been affected by the COVID situation. So apart from those, nothing to highlight there. Camping and caravan parks on page 101, no votes or surrenders, nearly spot on budget again coming through, a little bit up in revenue and a little bit up in our overall salaries at the caravan park itself. So they're nearly offsetting each other, so nothing to highlight there. KPIs on 102 to 103, both green indicators there, which is good. So nothing else to highlight there. Community Connect services, 104, nearly spot on budget. So nothing to highlight there. And the 2 KPIs on the next 2 pages, they're from May as well, which have been removed out of our actual KPI side of things. So we've removed those out of the actual Depop going forward. So please ignore those 2 pages. 105 and 106, correct. Economic promotion on 107. Here we've got nearly spot on budget overall. A little bit underspent in our salaries there, and a little bit up in our costs. So We Live Here project, it's continuing on, and obviously we'll have a vote coming through from an unexpended grant in our RAs to cover off a lot of those costs there. KPIs on 108 to 109, 2 green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Private works on 110, no votes or surrenders.
Sorry, Wayne, can we just go back to economic affairs?
Yep.
Marywell Progress Association and Scone Chamber of Commerce, why do they have lines in our budget?
We provide a contribution to both associations.
It's in our contributions and grants policy.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're the annual costs that we pay. Moving into the private works area, no votes or surrenders, a little bit behind in our private works at this point in time. Obviously, With the COVID, it's a little bit related to it. So the actual requests aren't as in demand. So we just be mindful of that going forward. KPI on 111, it's a green indicator there. So we're still achieving our target on ones that we've had completed. Real estate on 112 to 113. No, sorry, I beg your pardon. There is a small vote going through, which is more or less the youth hostel at Sedgenhade, just with a hot water service that got needed emergency replacing. So we've done that. A little bit up in our revenue for the commercial properties at this point in time, which is quite good. And that's given the positive result on the bottom line on page 113. Moving into our KPIs on 114 to 115, two red indicators here. With regards to the achieved budgeted lease revenue, our measure for that, I think we haven't fully done that measure correctly. Director of Corporate may want to explain that better.
Yeah, that measure is actually not correct. It doesn't take into account the debtors that have been raised. So it's just done on a cash basis. So this indicator will be, as you can see, the actual income is going well, but we obviously, it's an accounting measure. During COVID, there's no eviction capacity, or there's no debt recovery action that we can take. So we're just managing the debtors the best we can and providing relief to those who qualify under the COVID code of conduct for tenants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the second one there is red. We're just reviewing all our leases at this point in time. So that's a bit of a focus that we've got at the moment to try and bring all those leases up to date. Moving into sale yards area on 116 to 117, no votes or surrenders at the moment. A little bit behind budget. Just obviously with our cattle numbers are still a little bit low. So our revenue streams has not hit the mark at this point in time.
Mr. Chair, just one track there on page 116, the truck wash costs. Over budget, are we still having problems with the truck wash? It's causing some of the costs.
Through the chair, not as far as I'm aware. Moving into with regards to the rest of the overspend there, it's mainly in regards to the finalisation of the actual project up there. So obviously we'll have a little bit of a RA coming through to cover off those additional project costs coming into the mix. But we'll still be mindful in regards to our actual numbers going through the facility at this point, and we'll be reviewing that on a constant basis. KPI side of things, I've got a green indicator there and a red indicator, and the red indicator is the numbers coming through. So we may look at that target going forward, because I think that's just been split on a 12 monthly basis. So we'll have a look and just make it more realistic coming into the mix. Moving into Scone Golf Course on 120, nearly spot on budget at the moment. So that's quite good. So hopefully if we can keep it to that level, that will be tremendous. Tourism and promotion on 121 to 122, no votes or surrenders, a little bit underspent at this point in time, just in regards to salaries, but nothing other than that. KPIs on 123 to 125, two red indicators here, obviously with the tourism sector. It's struggling at the moment. And there's one green indicator there, which is actual referrals to local attractions. So we're referring to whoever we can get in through the doors, but we haven't been getting many people through the doors. So obviously it is dependent on our restrictions.
Could I just ask a question in relation to that? Whilst we mightn't be getting so many people through the VIC, have we got any measure of what I anticipate to be increased traffic, particularly during the school holidays? The experience in Murrundi for quite a few business operators was significant increases in their business. So I'd be interested to know whether there's some way of measuring the number of people who visited the Shire since COVID, because one of the positive impacts of the COVID-19, as I understand it, is people can't jump on in Sydney, can't jump on a plane and go to Bali. They've got to revert to the old way of doing a holiday, which is a road trip with the kids in the back asking, when are we there yet? Are we there yet? So I'd be interested to know whether we can get some information. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We do record the visitations for the centres, and also we ask for their postcode, where they come from. Obviously, with the border closures and the overseas travel it's zero, we are expecting increases to come through. If you look at the caravan parks and camping grounds, they're actually going really, really well. So local tourism obviously is not that affected. So we will measure it during the holidays and see if there's been any effect of that factor. So yeah, I think I'm quite positive actually.
Very good, thank you. Moving on into waste management on page 126 to 127. We haven't got no votes or surrenders there, a little bit in front of budget at the moment, mainly due to, again, as we highlighted in the summary pages, about the pensioner concessions. So they're a little bit up in revenue at this point in time from the domestic waste fees. Apart from that, everything else is pretty well tracking along. KPI side of things on pages 128 through to 131. 4 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Noxious plants and weeds and vermin and so forth. On page 132, here we've paid our annual contribution coming through, a little bit higher than what we anticipated by a couple of $1,000. So we'll adjust that coming through into the August period so that we can bank that off. Stormwater management on page 133 to 134. No votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget here. Just with the capital expenditure, again, we've got a couple of those projects will come through with the restricted assets in August. KPI side of things on 135 through to 138, with 4 green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Street cleaning on page 139, no votes or surrenders, and a little bit actually in front of budget at the moment, so nothing to highlight there. It's just very early in the period. KPI on 140, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Rates, grants and interest on page 141, no votes or surrenders here. A little bit in front of budget, again with the pensioner concessions applied for to date. So that's the main reason for that one. KPI side of things on page 142 to 143, both green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there.
Can I just ask in relation to a grant, is it possible to get an update, please, on how we're progressing the expenditure of the Resources for Regions grant that we got for the Maralla Street Causeway?
Yes, we'll take that on notice and provide a response.
Thank you.
Moving into council services on page 144, no votes or surrenders here. Nearly spot on budget coming through. A little bit underspent in the salaries, obviously with the resignation of the former GM, but also then we've had a bit of additional costs there coming through just with the initial recruitment process that we've had to go through. So more or less offsetting one another.
Also, with reduction in councillor numbers from 9 to 8, there should be a bit of a saving.
Yep, in over
going
time.
through during the rest of the year.
Moving into KPIs on page 145, 2 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Health services on 146, no votes or surrenders here. Nearly spot on budget on the bottom line there. A little bit still behind with our fees and charges coming in, but we've also got a bit of savings coming through from our salaries and so forth with some vacant positions in the health area at this point in time. Hopefully we fill soon. KPI side of things, on page 147, it's a red indicator there, obviously with the vacancy that we've got at the moment. We're a little bit behind our inspections at this point in time with the on-site sewer management systems.
It's probably a good time to raise this. I'm slightly concerned about the number of vacancies that we're carrying overall. The sustainability manager position has been vacant for a while. We've heard about health inspectors are down, and we can see that showing up in the graphs. The corporate planner's resigned. We got the end of year report to produce, which would, I think, largely be well, that person would be involved. We've heard about the hostel workers. The staff survey did mention that some staff, quite a few respondents felt stretched, and that we were understaffed in certain areas, and their workload had increased because of that. There had been a sort of hiring freeze, I understand. What's the current situation, and how are we going to address that, and are we managing it sufficiently well?
Yeah, through the chair. So there are positions that we are advertising for. So the environmental health officer, we did try and recruit somebody for that position a few months ago, but we're unsuccessful. So we're having trouble finding a suitable candidate to fill that position. There are a number of other positions, I guess, like trainee positions that we've put on hold for now, and we're looking at recruiting later in the financial year, towards the middle of the financial year, is my understanding. So that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, in my area, the corporate planner's vacant at the moment, but most of that work revolves around the Depop, so that's been done. So I don't think it's prudent to recruit just at the moment, but I will be looking at that role, and it may be expanding it into corporate planning and business improvement. So I'm just looking at that role in its current form. There's a vacancy in finance as well, due to the transfer of the management accounting officer into the assets section. So there's a vacancy there, which I'm doing the corporate planning at the moment, and Wayne's covering the management accounting. But obviously that's not sustainable, but we are doing it, I think quite well. But obviously we will need to recruit those two positions.
Mr. Chair, I'll just make an overall comment. I'll have a look at the numbers across the board. In other words, how many positions are currently vacant, and the only other piece of information you really need from my perspective to get what does that really mean? I mean, there's always a churn rate. I'm not sure what the average per annum here is, but it is far from uncommon to have a number of vacancies at any one time. It's just the nature of local government. And the other interesting thing in local government with vacancies, particularly the length of time, is there are, and this has been an issue for decades in some areas of local government, particularly around town planning, around health and building, even engineers to a point, particularly in water and sewer, is the availability of applicants. Local government finds it difficult to match the salaries and packages that private enterprise offers in a lot of those disciplines. And in some of those areas, people simply don't want to work for local government in those areas because it can be difficult work, particularly in the town planning area, for example, with DA assessments and all that. So there are some traditional jobs in local government that are always hard to fill, just depends on the times. You do hear a lot of talk currently in all the various industries that, interestingly, because of COVID, there are more applicants in some of these positions out there right now because they're being displaced from the private enterprise component of those employments. So I'm not sure if that's true, but I do hear that there is a lot more people in some of those things looking for jobs that you normally wouldn't see out there. But I'll get HR just to do an overall and have a look at that and let you know, and form a view as to whether or not there's anything unusual there. And be mindful too that recruitment, as we've spoken about with the general manager's position, with the way that advertising, recruitment, it's really governed by the legislation, and that you just have to do it a particular way. You have no choice, and it does take time. In fact, far too long in many cases, but that's it. But I'll have a look at that and see what the overall number is across the board.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on, 148 in low income housing. So nearly spot on budget there. So nothing to highlight there. And the KPI on 49 is green, so there's nothing to highlight there. Public cemeteries on page 150 to 151. Here we're a little bit overspent at this point in time by just under 8,000. Majority of that relates to the lawn cemetery at Merriwar, which an RA will come through to cover off that cost coming through for the capital works.
Just on the cemetery, sorry, Wayne, through you, Mr. Chair. Just on the cemeteries, I've had an idea that maybe we can move our cemetery maintenance into more of a volunteer mode, whereby we could reduce our need for the 121,000 on cemetery maintenance down to, whatever it is. We've got a lot of volunteer groups around here, Men's Sheds, the Lions, the Rotary, CWA, if they wanted to apply. I think we need to look at putting our locals into one of those positions and actually build that type of work for them. So that would also reduce their need for us to give them donations as well. So there's funding there available. I think we should move down that way. But I'll take that up with the Infrastructure Services Committee. Just wanted to flag it in here.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, that would then, the maintenance would also include the maintenance and paths and that sort of thing around as well as infrastructure.
Well, the
Wouldn't be
maintenance
just about
all in.
mowing the lawn, would it?
No, but it's whatever we decide it'll be. So, but I'm just saying there is a burden on our staff that doesn't need to be there. And more often than not, we've asked St Hilliers to do it, and they say yeah, and then quick as a flash, nothing happens. So it's an issue, and it is. I mean, for Scone, the cemetery is the entrance at the northern side, and people look at it and they just go, "What a joke!" So we need to have more maintenance on them.
Mm-hmm.
Other councils do have those sort of arrangements, and typically you would provide the whippersnippers and mowers and the minor plant, as and they would just provide the labour. So it's certainly possible. Yep. With all the WH&S covered off. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Something to take in note and move forward with.
Well, further to the councillor's comments, the southern entry to town is, obviously the bypass is now the dominant feature. There were some Darracon employees out with whippersnippers yesterday, and again this morning, I think, as they came in. What's the long-term sort of plan for keeping that up? Because it's somewhat overgrown at the moment.
It's my understanding that Darracon is supposed to look after it for 12 months. And then obviously there have to be council discussions with that moving forward with the maintenance of that coming into the town.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I spoke one-on-one with Infrastructure New South Wales about 2 days ago about that exact topic, just to get an understanding of exactly what is the arrangements. The manager for this area, he's going to check on it. I said, I don't want best guess. I actually want to know, because we've actually received, I've received some, not lots, but a number of community members, in fact, come in and ask that very question. And we should have a very good answer. We should know. I think it will be something like Darracon have a 12 months. But these road reserves for national highways, having some experience with them in the past, get very complicated in relation to responsibilities. You will find that it probably will be something like 12 months, but it is only a set distance from the edge of the road. I don't want to sort of get all pedantic here, but this is the way it is. And that is a set distance, and that whippersnipper will not go beyond that set distance. And then the balance of the reserve is council. And then that's also subject to ownership questions and easements and all that sort of stuff. And it's to do with gazettals, but the gazettals on these things can actually take at least a year, believe it or not, in relation to transfer of ownership and all that. So I'm not sure how complicated that one was in the sense of how much private land was involved or not. But trust me, it'll take at least 12 months for that to be bedded down. But regards maintenance, yeah, there just needs to be agreements on who's responsible for what. And so I'm seeking official confirmation from Infrastructure New South Wales on exactly what those arrangements are. And the chap said that'll probably give him about a week to get that, because he wanted to do his checks as well. And then the minute we get that, yep, we'll need to make some decisions, because you can't have that piece of land looking untidy. I don't think anyone would think that's acceptable. But that is a long distance, and it'll be interesting to see what the cost outcome of that is as well. But yeah, so I'm seeking official confirmation on exactly that question.
It should also be, through you, Mr. Chair, it should also be noted that in Transport for New South Wales briefings to us, and indeed the community in this very room, that was all supposed to be landscaped so that it didn't need maintenance. And they dropped some trees in there and walked away. So, you know, they haven't actually, to my mind, finished.
I think with a little TLC sort of now, with Camberem or similarly grouped herbicide, you could knock some of the weed that's flourishing and get back to, you know, grasses and the trees, and it would look a lot better than it does.
It's disappointing, because if you look at the Liverpool Street overfly, they've done a great job there with the grass and having and it's been actually done properly. But, you know, at either end of the town, just, oh, well, no one sees that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to emergency housing on page 154. No votes or surrenders, and not much happening in that space at this point in time. Public convenience on 155, no votes or surrenders, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And KPI on 156 is a green indicator. Street lighting similar to before, no votes or surrenders and spot on budget, nothing much happening in the space at the moment. And the green indicator there on the KPI on 168.
Mr. Chair, if I may just regress on that entrance and that sort of thing. I speak rather proudly of Merriwar, where those are done by the entrances, and also the cemeteries are done by the parks and gardens. I don't know what you do over here, but all I know is this: I'd be very loath to see a change out there in Merriwar, because it is done, and it's done a lot with pride, because especially the cemeteries, a lot of those people that work there have some of their relatives in the cemeteries, and they just take a very strong personal pride in getting those areas mowed, etc. So I just put that out there, and I'm not knocking Councillor Burns' suggestion, but I'd be very loath to see that change at Merriwar.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I echo the sentiments with respect to Marano, but let's move on from town entrances. And but I'd just like to note, if I could, semi-seriously, that I just wanted to thank Council for eventually getting our street lighting provider to repair a street light in Marundo that I reported over 3 years ago. Almost record time.
Right, but Mr. Chair, you've put me on the spot, and now that I must mention Les in Aberdeen, who does a fantastic job in keeping Aberdeen shipshape and looking very tidy. A lesson for the town up the road.
Yes, thank you, councillor Fisher. Moving on to town planning. How about we move on? Let's get out of that world. Moving through, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit underspent at the moment. A little bit up on our development application revenue, which is quite good. Contributions from section 94 a little bit down, which offsets it slightly. And our planning is down with our salaries. So overall, we're a little bit in front of budget at this point in time. KPIs on pages 161 through to 163, 3 green indicators there. So there's nothing to highlight there. Building control on 164, no votes or surrenders. Again, a little bit in front of budget, which is good. up in regards to some revenue in regards to section 68 and 138 fees, inspections and compliance certificates. So that's quite good. So it means things are happening around the building industry, which is good.
Could I just ask a question, just in relation to that and the previous topic? I gather that we're receiving more DA applications and building approval applications.
Mr Chair, it's either that or the value of the applications are greater. Yep. Unfortunately, we don't have that statistic in here anymore on the number of applications, but I suspect there's probably been an increase in applications, yes.
Thank you. KPI side of things for the building control, 2 green indicators there on 65 and 66, so nothing to highlight there. Quarry operations on 167, no votes or surrenders, nearly spot on budget overall. Up in our revenue side of things and up in our operation cost as well at the quarry, so we're dragging a bit of material out of the facilities. Moving into the KPI on 168, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight. Animal control on 169, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. KPI side of things on 170 to 171, a red indicator there just in regards to the impounded animals released and rehomed. Obviously that'll hopefully improve over time, and a green indicator for the second KPI. Emergency services on page 172. Here we'll see where we've got the vote coming through for the additional funding that we've received, and more or less going to offset the additional costs that's going to come through for the SES contribution. So overall, year to date, we're up by about that revenue we've received now. KPI side of things, a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight. Fire services, again, similar to the emergency services area, we've just got the additional revenue coming through and the additional contributions required for RFS and the fire brigade. Overall, on 175, it's up by the additional revenue coming through, so nothing to highlight there. LG regulations on 176, no votes or surrenders here, a little bit over budget at this point in time, a little bit under in our revenue streams from swimming pool inspections to date. So just a little bit behind in that area.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr Chair, how are we behind in swimming? How did COVID affect a swimming pool inspection?
Through you, Mr Chair, I guess I don't think that's 100% correct. I think there has been obviously a drop in the number of inspections, and there certainly was during COVID. We suspended that inspection program to minimise risks to staff, but that has certainly picked up again. You'll see a big increase coming through this month.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, KPI side of things, as Councillor Byrne just highlighted, and as the Director highlighted as well, we're a little bit behind with our swimming pool inspections to date, and obviously that should hopefully turn to green the next month. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Community centres and halls on 179, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And on 180, our KPI, it's a red indicator at this point in time, mainly due to limitations on our bookings coming through because of COVID, and a few measures we're putting into place at this point in time with that hiring of our facilities. Cultural services on 181. Here we're nearly spot on budget again coming through, so nothing to highlight there. And on 182, just got a red indicator there, just a little bit behind by only one facilitated activity. So we're just going through the Australia Day survey stuff at the moment. Obviously with COVID, that'll have an effect on a lot of our events and ceremonies moving forward, you would anticipate. Museums on 183, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit overspent to date. We've just done a bit more building maintenance there. So we've jumped in and done a bit of building as we're coming through. Other sport and rec on 184, no votes or surrenders, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And our KPIs for that area are both green, which is tremendous. Parks and Gardens on 187 to 188, no votes or surrenders coming through. And again, we're nearly spot on budget coming through the mix, which is quite good at this point. And our KPIs again on 189 to 190, both green indicators to date. Public libraries on 191 to 192. Again, we're seeing that we're nearly spot on budget coming through being the first month. So nothing to highlight there. And our KPI side of things, this is where you see the COVID take effect, where we've had 3 green indicators and 3 red indicators. So obviously the red indicators is in regards to a few library loans and so forth. So, and visitations to the libraries. So people are wary about going into those facilities, you would assume. Sporting grounds and venues.
It was my understanding that we were going to include a KPI that or include digital loans and digital access in the KPIs going forward. Oh, so that's already in, yeah.
Moving through to sporting grounds and venues on page 199 to 201. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Here we're overspent quite substantially, and it's mainly due to the capital projects that we've got rolling over. So obviously a lot of the stronger community fund projects were rolled over from June. So we'll have a lot of votes going through this in August to counteract that spend. Apart from that, all the operational side of things is pretty well on track. KPI side of things on page 202 to 203, both green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Swimming pools on page 204 through to 205, no votes or surrenders, and nearly on budget as well coming through. So we've just continued with our pool painting out there at Merriwall. So hopefully that's moving ahead pretty solidly before the season.
Is there maintenance going on at Scone at the moment?
Probably take that on notice and I'll let you know where that is actually at.
Thank you.
So I'm not aware of any. I know that we have got a project that's for the pool itself, painting in the pool, but where that's at, I'm not quite sure. KPI side of things on page 206, a green indicator there, but nothing to highlight there. Aerodrome on pages 207 to 208. Here we're a little bit in front of budget, mainly due to our funding from the Restart and Rebuilding New South Wales. We're a little bit in front there with that funding source at this point in time, just with the monthly ones coming through. But our user fees are down slightly, which again, we'll have to have another look at that with our, possibly the invoicing to the end of the year. But we'll have a look at the target going forward to make sure that that's taken into account, I think. But overall, nothing to highlight there. With regards to the aircraft movements, as you can see there, our movements are actually up. So the revenue's down again. It must be the invoicing fact and timing.
Mr. Chair, if I may just go back to 204.
Yep.
Operating costs, $384,060. That's for the 3 pools. That's paying for the people to run the pools for us. Is that correct? That's
Correct.
That's
Correct.
it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Moving into bridges on 210 to 211. Here, no votes or surrenders, and we're nearly spot on budget overall. So there's nothing much to highlight there. And moving into our KPIs, we've got 3 green indicators there. So nothing to highlight there. Footpaths and cycleways, here on page 215, no votes or surrenders. A little bit overspent, mainly due to the continuation of the Movie Cycleway, which a vote will come through into this year in August to cover that off from the RA. Again, another bit of carryover work that we were doing. KPI side of things on 216 to 217, 2 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. State roads along the Golden Highway out there on 218, no votes or surrenders. A little bit overspent at this point in time. Just we've had an increased level of some works orders and stuff out there, which has been good, and maintenance obviously out there as well. So obviously we should hopefully see that coming through in our revenue streams when we do the invoicing for July and also the quarterly RMAP invoicing.
Can I just ask, what on that work that we do out on the Golden Highway, what is our yearly profit on average?
There's no profit.
We generally put aside some funds out of that towards other projects.
Okay.
Moving into the KPIs on pages 219 to 220, no votes or surrenders, no red lights here, all green indicators, so pretty well spot on budget there. Regional roads on pages 221 to 222. Here we've got a little bit under budget at this point in time. Again, just in regards to the capital works program coming through. So obviously we'll have some funding put in there in August for some of those projects. KPI side of things on pages 223 to 225. We've got 3 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Local roads on page 226 to 227. Here we've got no votes or surrenders. Here you'll see where we've had a bit of our overspends coming through, as highlighted in the summary pages earlier. So we've been into the gravel resheeting as well as the unsealed road maintenance, mainly in that area. And as indicated earlier, Councillor Campbell will obtain a listing of what that works entail.
I shall wait with bated breath. Thank you. Yes.
Not a problem. KPI side of things on 228 through to 200 and 232. We've got 4 green indicators on 1 red indicator. And the red indicator is the length of unsealed grading completed. So again, I'd like to see what the works that we've actually completed to date, just so that we can marry that off with the expenditure that we've actually incurred.
Could I just ask, and I'm sure that I am just looking in the wrong place, where is the Morella Street Causeway as a capital project in the line item?
Through the chair, that's in Bridges.
Aha,
Bridges.
Thank
Yep.
you. It's not a bridge though, you know that.
We do know that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's definitely a large causeway. We'll probably just leave it where it's sitting at this point in time. Yeah. Moving into our water supply area, here on 237 to 238. Here we've got no votes or surrenders. A little bit over budget, in front of budget here at the moment, mainly due to our, again, pensioner concessions, but also we're a little bit underspent in a couple of our maintenance areas there for mains and pump stations to date, so haven't required as much expenditure on maintenance work. Water at Murundai, so here we've got 239 to 240. Again, just with the pensioner concessions, we're a little bit in front of budget.
Mr. Chairman, could I just go back to 238? The new bore investigation, $20,000. Where are that up to at Murray Ward? Because I just wonder, there's been no further movement on that. Those bores seem to have stood up extremely well, the 3 of them. during the drought, as well as water usage on MR 358. I'm just wondering what's the idea?
Yeah, we'll effectively take that on notice and get you an update in regards to that investigation works from infrastructure. Yep. So finishing off the Marundi water side of things, it's nearly spot on budget overall. We're up a little bit in our revenue streams, but also we're up a little bit in our maintenance costs as well. So a little bit offsetting there. The Scone water supply on pages 241 to 243, no votes or surrenders here. Again, a little bit up in our revenue streams from the pensioner concessions, but also we received earlier than we thought a bit of a grant for a project in regards to a survey, a study being done. So we'll be banking off a corresponding vote down into the projects area once we identify that or recognise that. The other side of things in regards to this area, a little bit overspent in maintenance of our mains and our water treatment at this point in time. So that offsets that additional revenue to give a $61,000 in front of budget at this point in time. KPI side of things on 244 to 246, all green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Merriwa Sewerage on page 247, 248, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit in front of budget again, mainly due to the pensioner concessions as highlighted earlier. And the same can be said for the Merriwa Sewerage as well on 249 to 250. Again, just with the pensioner concessions, apart from that, it's pretty well tracking along. And the Scone sewer on 252, again, a little bit, we're in front of budget at the moment, mainly due again to the pensioner concessions, but also we're a little bit underspent in our maintenance required to date in this area as well. KPI side of things on 253 through to 256, 4 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. And then we just move into a summary overall of our capital expenditure that we're anticipating for the 2021 year. So being the first month off the ranks, all the projects are sitting there. Some are moving at this point in time. Bottom line is $67 million to be spent.
And 213 line items. I counted them this morning. 213.
Sure, we'll be able to complete all of those on time and under budget. There is a recommendation to have a mover and seconder, Councillor Fisher and Councillor Brown. All those in favour, against, declare it carried. FCR 083, the contractors and expenses report.
Okay, so just moving through pretty well into the schedules there. So the main one of the interest is mainly the consultancy and legal fees. So at this point in time, being such a formative part of the year, we've only had really the heritage advisor coming through as a consultant fee at this point in time. So apart from that, it's pretty well it.
Thank you, seconder. Councillor Burns, all those in favour, against, declare it carried. The final report, the FCR 084, the responses to previous questions. The council is satisfied with the responses that have been provided.
Mr. Chair, yes, I am. I have a further question when it comes up.
Sure. Anyone else have any comments on the report? Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I brought this up, the infrastructure. The water treatment plant at Scone, there seems to be the problems we have with the water quality, etc., going to Scone and to. I'm just wondering whether or not we can get a costing on a suitable plant that would service and overcome this this problem. and whether we can just try and progress that, have it, I suggest shovel ready, so that if there is a grant or something comes up, that we can then put in immediately for this. Now, I know it comes from the infrastructure, and I accept that, but however, the money's got to come through the finance. And so I would just like to progress that if we possibly can, please.
Yep, we'll just take that on notice.
I would, through you, Mr. Chair, the circumstances to build a new treatment plant are actively being looked at. And there'll be reports coming to council on what all that means in relation to, so feasibilities is the initial process you do there, of course. And I've got conversations with premiers and cabinet, I think the week after next, to put it on the record for them through some people there. But everyone I speak to basically seems to share the view that it is a path that you will need to go down. But we need to plan that properly. And I can also add that when the Mayor and I met with Muswellbrook Council a few days ago in the discussion around just thinking about the future, it was put on the table that to also consider whether there'd be any advantages in fact, building a treatment plant that serviced both communities. So some long-term thinking there, and certainly worthy of just examining the feasibility of that. And if you were to do that, how you would do that. But a bit of creative thinking there, and something worthwhile just scoping out and seeing what that really means, because it could benefit both communities in a financial way. I'm talking about here. Treated water is treated water, but it's about the operational costs and the capital costs. They're the things you need to make sure you're looking at all options. But I think a treatment plant is going to have to occur at some point into the future, and probably sooner than later from all the feedback I get.
Thank you. Thank you.
Probably further to that, the advantages of a joint application in attracting grant funding might, there might be an advantage there as well. So yeah, it's worth considering.
Thank you. I just have one question as well, just in relation to the format of meetings of this committee. I was hoping that it might be possible for staff to investigate some options to streamline the way that these meetings are conducted. For instance, perhaps limiting it to exception reporting or something like that. So if it'd be possible to for the committee to receive a report.
Yeah, there'll be a report to the next committee. We've already had started discussions down that path.
That's great news. Thank you very much. Well, my understanding is that the budget reviews are only required to be undertaken every 6 months, but most councils do it quarterly. And I think 6 months is too long.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, the delivery plan updates by legislation 6 monthly, and the your budget reviews or your financial reviews minimum quarterly. What a lot of councils do is they stick to that requirement, but on the financial side, they do monthly exception reporting, which I think is a good idea, because it enables, particularly when you have a finance committee, all those monthly revisions all obviously get incorporated into your quarterly reviews, but monthly by exception on finance, full quarterly. So the detailed information that you're getting now quarterly, and on your delivery plan, a lot of councils were doing that quarterly, even though it was 6 monthly, but are sort of looking now at the cost of that and thinking staff could be doing other things, and have gone back to quarterly on your delivery plan reviews. So your KPIs about library loans and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so you do have, but there are legislative minimums, but you have options within all those timeframes.
No, that sounds great. Councillor Burns.
Yes, Mr. Chair. have been approached by a few business holders around around the Shire, and they've been asked to tender for some of our complicated tenders for toilet blocks and things like that, which are, and I say they're complicated because I didn't understand them. Basically, I would like to move that council create an education program to teach local business and service providers how to tender for the Upper Hunter Shire Council. So we build an education program, and then we go out, get the Chamber of Commerce, the Merriwell Progress Association to put people in a room with us, and we teach them how to. So we're actually using locals instead of sending it out, well, in my case, offshore. You know, we want to keep the money here instead of sending it out. But people are afraid to tender because they see the document and they go, oh, there's no chance.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. Councillor Fisher, do you want to? I was going to call for one. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Did anyone have any?
Yeah, very
through
positive.
you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Do you want to go first?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, yeah, that's not a problem. It's a good idea. But at the end of the day, I've done a few of these things in the past, and sometimes the education program turns into for some, they still think it's all too complicated. But at the end of the day, we do live in the local government world, and our hands are tied on many of these things. But any strategy to ensure that your local contractors and your local tradespeople get as much opportunity as possible to do council work, I mean, that's a good thing. So coming up with a sort of a program to better explain, some councils go to even to get lists of local tradesmen every year. They might even put out a tender, expression of interest for all those trades who would like to be considered. And you ask them what their expertise is. So, it's usually broken up: construction, plumbing, whatever it is, doesn't matter. So that you have that mail out list, so that when opportunities do come up, an email can go out to those respective businesses, letting them know that, what the sort of year's program is or whatever. So again, just about passing on information, but running some seminars, some workshops with those who are interested to better understand how to fill out tenders and submit things. Yeah, that's all achievable. There's no worries in that.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that already is taking place. In other words, you have to register with the council your equipment and your expertise. It just seems somewhere along the line that when some of these jobs come up, that they are not being emailed out and they're not being notified, and that seems to be where I believe some of the problem is. There had to be an understanding, and I believe there should be an understanding that we are part of a complete shire. So there should be a level playing field for all, whether you live in Murrurundi, you live in Scone, you live in Merriwell and Cassilis, to tender or to put in a price for a particular project. And that seems to me to be where it's falling down, is that they are not being notified that these particular jobs come up, that would be able to use their expertise or their facilities.
Thank you. Did Councillor Burns want to respond?
Not really. I just wanted to say I actually misspoke, and it should be that council investigate an education program, not create. So the report will come back to this committee and go from there. But yeah, sorry that I wrote the wrong thing. I'm not sure about the email not going out. I know plenty of people from all townships within our shire that are getting tenders, but they just don't want to apply because they look at the paperwork and go, can't do it.
Thank you. Were there any other?
I've just got one, and this is in view of the recent IPART rating report and the state government's response, and taking into consideration the Muswellbrook Shire Council's Land and Environment Court verdict, their win in the Land and Environment Court, re the rating of mining offset properties. And it's also further to the work that the director has already undertaken in this field. I was just wanted to canvass opinion of those in the room as to commissioning a review of our rating structure, our categories, subcategories, etc. And if necessary, whether we should enlist an independent contractor to assist with that process. And just what the feeling in the room for. It's not a notice of motion because I haven't found the necessary money in the budget to pay for this. I just want to sort of kick off the conversation and we'll really keep this ball rolling because we have discussed it in council, and I think we are missing out on quite a significant amount of money, particularly in that offset rating category, but also in others as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Just before we do have that discussion, quickly, I just put Councillor Burns's motion in relation to the, yes, well, it's been moved and seconded. All in favour, against, declare it carried.
Yeah, it was
No, I know you're keen. I know you're keen. Okay. Yes, the new order will be restored. I think that there's a great deal of merit, though, to undertake the work Councillor Fisher has suggested. I think there are opportunities through using the rating system to yield additional revenues and to reduce the burden on some ratepayers who are currently overstretched. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of merit in undertaking a body of work like this.
I have no objection.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, there is a lot of offset country out in the Merriwa area, which does receive debate from time to time and some criticism. There has been some cooperation or more cooperation coming from some of the mining companies, but once again, we're looking at thousands of acres out there. I think the last one was well over 70,000 acres. Convert that if you wish. So that's a considerable amount. And I just wonder really with they're supposed to be very good citizens of the community. However, they have completely taken it around from being a livestock enterprise, which most of it is livestock enterprise, not farming, because it's higher country. There's not the number of livestock being run on those farms. So consequently, their maintenance is totally different. It's very low. There has been criticism, extensive criticism regarding some of the feral animals that affect the neighbours and affect the area, because it's. I just wonder how this can be addressed. I know when I was on the board of the LLS, it was brought up there regarding those offsets, but it really comes back to council, because really this is where the rating system, where the money can be derived if things can be changed.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I think you've got your direction there, Councillor Fisher. I think there is support. I'm not sure what the next steps might be, but it might be worth preparing a report to council.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I understand what you're asking. I can say that is a major exercise. It is often an extremely community sensitive exercise, because regardless of your motives, it gets interpreted in all manner of ways. So all I'm saying is you need to do it in a very structured, ordered and an agreed manner. The IPART report, I think the state government is still to conclude some positions on aspects of the recommendations. The actual IPART examination and where it's all heading, actually, I'm quite close to, because the recommendation to do all this came out of the independent local government review panel, of which I was a member. So I sort of know the history of this, and there are many faults with the local government rating system, particularly in regards to even metropolitan areas and unimproved capital value versus improved value. And a lot of that's now been addressed. So it's an important matter. I'd probably like to just have a chat with you a little bit more about the specific circumstances here that you think need to be addressed, because it is those circumstances that will dictate the type of review that you will do. So is it for, what do I mean by that? The categories and subcategory structure, that's fixed in the sense of the legislation, but you do have a lot of options, not in the options in relation, you have no options regards the main categories, but it's the subcategory arrangements whereby you can become a little bit more innovative and targeted in relation to whatever it is that you're trying to target. And I guess that's where I'm going. I would like to just get a better handle on the actual problem areas that you're trying to address, so that you don't incorrectly target areas that you're content with. So we probably need to, I would recommend that if you're serious about going forward with it, that you'd probably want to get together as a group and we just workshop what we're trying to achieve before you sort of go that next step, because before you act, we've got to get agreement on what it is that we're trying to achieve here. What's the outcome that you're looking for? Because that will dictate the scope of the review. That can happen. But if you're going to go to that trouble, you want to do it properly. And so let's be clear about what it is. And I don't think we're going to do that today. So maybe we organise in the near future just a workshop, a get together, sit around and have a discussion about what it is that you're looking for. And then we can come back with the scoping paper for you. And of course, it's a big matter. You're not going to have it in place for the next budget. And of course, you've got elections and all those sorts of things. So you need to think about those timeframes, and maybe it's something you put into your next delivery plan as a project. There's options around that.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, if I just make
Councillor
further
Campbell.
comment. Yeah, look, I agree with the sensitivity of it too. It was very sensitive topic here probably 2 years ago, but there has been various measures taken, especially through the LLS with the wild dog program, and the feral animals program, which has been very successful. And those mining companies have been very cooperative. They've also been financially committing money to these particular programs. So by doing that,
Councillor Campbell, I might just draw you up. I think that you're moving a little off topic.
am I? Well, I didn't think so.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I would suggest that is very much part of the topic. But if it's different to what you're expecting, well, that's fine. But those matters would need to be part of that discussion.
It's not so much the management of those properties, it's the rating structure and subcategory that they fall under currently. And we have an opportunity through the court win of our neighbours to adjust that. We have quite a healthy ad valorem mining rate in the Shire, and we could raise a considerable amount of money by re-rating these properties. And there is a proliferation of them, as you know. I'm not quite sure. I'm not even sure that we're sure how many we have in the Shire. But yeah, and this is, it's what I call nitty gritty money. It's for spending on road, the 3 hours, in my opinion, and we certainly need more of it. And this is one way of raising it.
Okay, thank you. I think that we've reached some consensus on this. So if we're agreed to a workshop, I think we can, I think that's a really good idea. So at that point, unless anyone else has anything, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance.